Welcome to the first episode of the Essentially Sports DraftCast with Tony Pauline. My name is Tim Wood, here with the draft expert himself, Tony Pauline. Very excited to get this podcast underway. We'll be talking about all things NFL draft and everything pertaining to the draft. I am the NFL editorial chief for Essentially Sports. Tony, you want to give a little bit background on yourself?
Well, I'm probably, if not the biggest, the second largest Led Zeppelin fan on the face of the earth. I've been in the NFL draft business a long time, almost 30 years. Got some right, got some wrong. As you'll see over this podcast, I was at the forefront of a couple of different things, which I'll never get credit for. But, listen, NFL draft, like Led Zeppelin, the NFL draft is my lifeblood. It's in my DNA. It's something I'm addicted to. And I know that Tim and I are going to have a lot of fun with these podcasts over the next couple of months.
Very excited to get into it. Lot to get into out of the jump here. Let's get right into it. So first up today, Tony, Black Monday. We've had a lot of movement as we record this podcast. We've got four that have faced the guillotine already today. Raheem Morris came out. That news came out Sunday night, along with the GM Fontenot. Then this morning we hear about Kevin Stefanski. We hear about Pete Carroll. The GM stays there, and then Jonathan Gannon gone in Arizona. What's your initial take on all this, Tony?
Well, those were the four suspects that we were looking at as the likely guys who were going to get fired. Maybe not Raheem Morris because of the way the Falcons finished the season. And I'm slightly surprised about that. But I think it is interesting in the sense that there's not a very deep pool of coaching candidates that are available. If you go back and you read the story that was posted earlier this week about the situation with the New York Jets and Aaron Glenn, and the people I talked to said, it was not like last year where you had the Liam Combs and the Mike Vrabels and the Ben Johnsons and people who were, coordinators or former head coaches that people were chomping at the bit to get. There's not a very deep pool. And remember, besides the four that you mentioned, we got to throw the Tennessee Titans in there because they're going to be looking for a head coach.
Absolutely.
The New York Giants are very likely going to be looking for a new head coach. So I'm surprised, and with some of the situations, Stefanski in Cleveland didn't have a good record, but could never get that situation at quarterback figured out in large part because of Deshaun Watson. Atlanta because of the way they finished the season. Pete Carroll, not surprised at all. A week ago, put the
You
story
said
out
it.
on Sports that people were telling me that Carroll was done, one and done. Not the first time for Pete Carroll. Remember, back in 1994, he was the head coach of the New York Jets for one season. After the season, he got fired. So it's the second time, one and done for Pete Carroll. It's going to be interesting to see the names that bubble up as far as who are the leading candidates for these spots.
So, first of all, just give you a little shine. Just a shout out to the Reddit folks. I mean, Tony was first on Carroll in terms of that news. The first one that actually wanted to put it out there. Everybody jumped on later in the week, but Tony Tony put it out there, and we put it out on ES, and that nailed that one. So
And
you
let me
know,
just let me
yeah,
just say that wasn't just like going out on a limb because there's a very good
yeah.
chance Farrell was going to get fired. But I think people need to read the article because the article goes a little bit deeper or says that the issues with the Raiders are a little bit deeper than just the head coach. I mean, you got Tom Brady in there. Tom Brady's calling the shots. There's talk, maybe Brian Flores, who Tom Brady spent time with in New England. So it's basically Tom Brady's operation with the Raid in Las Vegas. And as I said in the article, there are a lot of high caliber stars in that organization that are getting fed up. They think that their careers are being wasted away. So I would really recommend people go back and read the article because it's a lot deeper than Pete Carroll, one and done, a 3-14 season, and the disaster that the Raiders have been past 5 years since Gruden was fired. They did have the that little bit of spark with the special teams coach, who they probably should have kept as Rich. I should know who he is. He's friends with my brother-in-law.
Basirico.
Rich Bizach, exactly. Got to say it the Italian way, Northeast Italian way. Rich Bizach, who they probably should have kept as coach because he did a great job. It's been all downhill since.
So you mentioned Brian Flores, the Tom Brady connection. You feel like Brian Flores? I mean, he has not interviewed well from everything we've heard in the past. Uh, you know, proving to be right in terms of his take on Miami. Do you feel like he deserves another shot?
I do. I mean, he's a good defensive coordinator. I know he's irked a lot of people in the league the wrong way, which may prevent him from getting another shot. But I do think he deserves another shot. Like I said, he's a terrific defensive coordinator throughout his entire career. Was proven right in Miami. The issue in Miami was he did not want Tua. Miami, the owner and everyone and the general manager went and selected Tua Tagovailoa, and now Tua's like a scarlet letter around the necks of the Miami Dolphins. Always banged up, average quarterback, huge salary cap number. And bottom line is this: I do think that Flores deserves a second shot. Oftentimes, coaches come back the second go around, and they're better than they were the first time because they learn from their mistakes.
The one coach so far that's come out of this firing that still has a little shine on him is Stefanski. I mean, there's been a little chatter around the Giants and Stefanski. I mean, you're in New York. Do you feel any smoke, any fire behind that smoke?
I mean, the Giants historically like defensive coordinators or defensive minded coaches. That's when they've usually had, and they've like disciplinarians. That's where they've had their most success. Now, you got a young quarterback in Jackson Dart. Stefanski's a guy that they hope can develop him. I do think they'll bring him in. I think it's less than a 50% chance that he gets the job. But again, go back to what I said in the beginning. It's not a very deep pool of coaching candidates. So if these guys start to fall by the wayside, or the guy that you want right away, the guy that's at the top of your list is not available because someone else signs him, it could be a coach by default.
In terms of Carroll, do you feel like he got a raw deal? I mean, you talked about a little bit. You talked about it a lot in your article in terms of the culture there,
Right.
but it's kind of crazy. You signed him for a 3-year deal. Nothing worked out there.
Right. I don't think he got a raw deal. I think it was a ridiculous hire to begin with. The same thing with
Yeah.
Josh McDaniel. I mean, go back 3 years ago when McDaniel was hired. I was at the Shrine Bowl, and I was writing articles that people said McDaniel will be gone by his second season. He didn't last a year and a half. And it was sort of the similar thing with Pete Carroll a year ago. I mean, there's no coincidence that Pete Carroll leaves Seattle. He goes to the Raiders. They're 3-14, and now Seattle is the number one ranked team in the NFC as we head towards the playoffs. So I don't think he got a raw deal. I think it was just a dumb hire from the get-go.
You also wrote an article about the Ravens and the Steelers that's up on Essentially Sports, and the coaching decisions there played out. Missed field goal. Ravens, Harbaugh. Last second loss once again. Uh, do you see movement there?
I think there's going to be a lot of discussions. I think it's going to take some time. Like I said in the article, the speculation is that the sides may agree to separate. That Harbaugh his time in Baltimore he's been there since what, 2008, has run its course. There was a Super Bowl championship, but lately there's been a lot of disappointment. You go back to that loss in the AFC title game to the Kansas City Chiefs. As I said in the article, I think there's going to be discussions about it. Don't be surprised if the issues with Lamar Jackson start to bubble up since they lost and they're out of the playoffs. And, if they separate ways, Harbaugh is fired, I think it's more they agree to separate ways. he immediately becomes the number one coaching candidate. He is the guy. He is the Mike Vrabel of the 2025 off season.
We shall see how it plays out. All right, other big topic obviously is the draft order is set. Let's take a look at where we're at. And the Raiders move, not a shock, especially since they end up with the number 1.
Yep.
Jets 2, Cardinals end up 3, Titans 4, Giants 5. You see the 6 through 10 here. Did Carroll get the boot, especially because they got the number 1 and they need to get that pick right?
Excuse me. I think it's part of the reason. I think it's also that Tom Brady, again, I hate to be redundant, but I got to go back to it. I mean, Tom Brady, it's basically it's his baby. He's a minority owner there, but now he can get his coach. His coach, along with the general manager Spytek, who was Brady's selection, now have the number 1 pick, and they can decide which quarterback they want at the top of the draft. Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore, assuming he enters the draft. And we'll talk more about that as the show goes on. Everyone has, basically penned Fernando Mendoza as the number 1 pick in the draft. You may want to make sure you use a pencil so you can erase it, because as we get closer to the draft, I think you're going to hear more and more about Dante Moore being potentially the first pick of the entire draft if he enters the process.
So let's talk a little bit about Moore. You've done a lot of talk with their camp over the last week to 10 days. What are you hearing?
Well, I've actually done it for about 3 weeks now. I mean, one of the first articles I put up on Essentially Sports was that the word was done, and this was the beginning of December. Was everyone was saying Dante Moore was going to stay at Oregon? They were going to give him a huge NIL deal, which was going to be 8 figures. He would make a run. He would be a top Heisman Trophy candidate in 2026. We'll see what happens with Oregon as they go through the college football playoffs. But, there's the national championship. And everything in Oregon, as I said in the article, is designed for success for Dante Moore. A couple of weeks later, I had mentioned that I spoke to his people, and they said if he's going to be a top 3 pick, the discussion has to be basically, recommending that he enters the draft because of the money involved. Earlier, or I should say, last week, probably Monday or Tuesday, I spoke with somebody from his team, and they said that they're basically going to tell Dante Moore he needs to enter the draft. He's going to be either the first or second selection of the draft by the Jets or the Raiders. And then when you break down the numbers, he's expected probably to sign an NIL deal from between 12 to 15 million dollars. Doesn't mean that Oregon's going to pay him that much, but his NIL deal plus his endorsements and everything else is going to be between 12 to 15 million dollars. Now, you look at the recent number 2 picks in the draft. Travis Hunter last year had signed a 4-year deal, $46.65 million guaranteed. The prior year, it was Jaden Daniels, 4-year deal, $37.7 million guaranteed. So you got to expect that the deal for the number 2 pick in the draft, which is
Yeah.
the lowest that Dante Moore is going to go, is going to be about $55 million. So they're going to put this in front of him, and they're going to say, look, at this point in time, this is the money that you're guaranteed. If you go back, maybe you make 12 to 15 million, but you're risking injury, things like that. And I was told that where he may end up will factor into the decision, or at least will be part of the conversation. If you enter the draft, you're going to go to the Las Vegas Raiders or the New York Jets. And he has to be comfortable with that. I mean, New York Jets do not have a good history of developing quarterbacks. Quarterbacks go there for ruin. You look at Aaron Rodgers this year compared to Aaron Rodgers last year. The ultimate decision is going to come down to Dante Moore, and I have no idea what he's thinking. But everything I've heard from the people around him is that they're going to put the facts in front of him, and they're going to recommend that he enters the draft, or they're going to present the information, and all the information is that he should enter the draft. Whether he does or not, that's up to Dante Moore. The interesting intangible is where he ends up. Does he say, listen, if I'm not going to the Raiders with the first pick, I'm staying in school, taking my chances because there's no way I want to play for the New York Jets. That's just me speaking, off topic. But that's going to be, I think, an integral part of the conversation.
One of the other interesting topics to come out this week is another broadcaster getting into the front office game. Supposedly, a lot of talk that Troy Aikman's going to end up advising the Miami
Yep.
Dolphins on their GM situation. Uh, Weird history in terms of quarterbacks getting involved here. What's your take on Aikman in Miami?
Well, it's not a weird history. It's just not a good history. I mean, if
Yeah.
you remember back in 2019, Woody Johnson leaned heavily on Peyton Manning for recommendations who should be the head coach. And Peyton Manning suggested Adam Gase, and that was a disaster. He wasn't a quarterback, but John Gruden chose Mike Mayock, the former NFL Network draft analyst,
Yep.
to be his general manager. And I like Mike personally. He's a wonderful guy. I was rooting for Mike, but that was a complete disaster. And you have to say that everything that's going on in Vegas since Tom Brady's been involved has not gone well. Tom Brady, guaranteed he would get guys like Ben Johnson to the Raiders and he would get players there. And as I said in the article, all these coordinators and players have done is used Brady as leverage to get bigger and greater deals. So it has not worked out. Troy Aikman, Hall of Fame quarterback, knows a lot of people in the league, but just because you know X's and O's on the field doesn't mean you know personnel off the field. So I understand Stephen Ross wants to do the right thing in Miami, and credit to him. But relying on former players to pick the people or to have a say in the people that are going to determine personnel and things like that, it's not been a good history just in the last 6, 7 years.
It's fascinating to me with Aikman. I mean, Aikman in Miami specifically. I mean, Aikman. There was talk that Aikman was gonna go to Miami to end his career, and that didn't work out. And now he's back in play with the Dolphins. So it's gonna be fascinating to see what he adds to the canvas that's developing down there. All right,
Not
we
the
want to
first.
tell. Go ahead.
It's not the first time for Stephen Ross. I apologize
Sure.
for cutting you off. Not the first time for Stephen Ross. I reported a couple of years ago at a former outlet that I was working that the rumor was Stephen Ross had offered none other than Tom Brady a share, an equity stake in the franchise if, when his contract was done with New England, he would come to Miami. And people, kind of laughed at me at the time. Turned out not only to be true, but if you remember, Miami lost a lot of draft picks because of tampering with it. So
Absolutely.
it's not the first time Stephen Ross has gone down this route. Last time, it didn't work out because he got penalized for it. We'll see what happens with Troy Aikman.
As a Patriots fan, lifelong Patriots fan, the way that Miami thing played out was gut wrenching. I didn't think anything would be worse than that. And now Brady in the Raiders and the Tuck rule, it's doomed to fail. I'm sorry. The karma behind it is doomed to fail. So I hate it. Um, all right. We want to tell you the ES big board has debuted on EssentiallySports.com with our man Tony Pauline. Very excited
Yeah.
to get this launch. A lot of work behind the scenes
Yes.
put in here. Um, this is basically just a starting point in terms of what you're liking on the big board. This isn't the draft board. This isn't
Right.
this isn't your mock draft. This is who you like right now.
Well, yeah, the Essentially Sports guys put a lot of work into it. It's really good looking, really nice piece of work. It's only going to get better. One thing I have to tell everybody is this is the big board. There's about 630 players on the big board right now, but everybody who's draft eligible is included on that big board. the Arch Mannings, the Lenora Sellers, even guys that have already said they're going back to school. So you look at it and, you'll say, well, Arch Manning's on here. He's number 41. He's not in the draft. What's going to happen is after Shrine and Senior Bowl practices, when the NFL releases the official list of underclassmen that have entered the 2026 NFL draft, that board will contract. All those players will be taken out. So up until that point, for the next couple of weeks, anybody who's eligible for the 2026 NFL draft, regardless of whether they've declared for the draft, they said they're going back to school, they're still making their decision, they're going to be ranked on that board till the beginning of February.
In terms of coming out of the college football playoff quarterfinals, let's dive a little bit into the Scouts notebook here. What stuck out from those games for you?
Well, number one, you got to go with Carson Beck. I mean, the concern with Carson Beck going into the Ohio State game, going up against a Buckeye defense that has 4 potential first rounders on that side of the ball, was how is Carson Beck going to play? Because Carson Beck, throughout his Georgia career, even at times this year in Miami, had a tendency to put his team in a hole by throwing inopportune interceptions or too many interceptions earlier in the game. So that was something that scouts wanted to watch. And to his credit, Carson Beck played wonderfully. He protected the football. He was accurate. He made big plays. He did not wilt under the Ohio State pressure. I think it was an A-plus game for Carson Beck. I was surprised at how poorly the Ohio State defensive 7 played, especially coming off that Indiana game where they were neutralized. I thought there should have been a different sort of game plan. Avril Reese, who I think most people project as a top 5 draft pick, once again was pretty much silent as he was against the Hoosiers. So, I think a lot of that falls on Matt Patricia, who was wonderful through the regular season with that Buckeye defense. But the Big Ten title game and that first game, the Cotton Bowl against Miami, I think it was a failure. But it was also a great success for Carson Beck.
How much does that mean for Carson Beck in terms of how he's viewed around the league right now?
Well, I'm glad you said how he's viewed around the league, because what's going to happen is, outside of the league, people are going to, if Carson Beck continues this sort of progression, people are going to be talking about him as a first round pick, as a top 60 pick. No, it's good, but what's going to happen, and it's headed in the right direction. But scouts at the combine, the teams at the combine, are going to ask Carson Beck, why didn't you play like this every week? What happened during the college playoffs that you were so wonderful, yet during the season, you threw 26 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, which is a terrible ratio. Remember, a year ago, Will Howard of Ohio State was terrific during his 4-game run through the college football playoffs, led Ohio State to a national championship. People were talking about him as a day 2 pick. He ended up in the 5th round with the Steelers, hasn't seen the field since. So, it's helpful in the sense that scouts look at a prospect and they ask, what does he do well? What is he good at? And they feel that they can build on there. Carson Beck, he's got a terrific arm. He's got NFL size. He can make all the throws. Sometimes he gets a little fuzzy between the ears. But, listen, performances like that can't do anything but help him. Is he all of a sudden going to vault to the top of the board? No, that's not going to happen.
Let's talk about in the reverse of that, Reese. You've got him top of your big board right now. How does seemingly cowering from the spotlight, you put a little bit of that on the coaching, but how does him not shining in those big moments, how does that impact how Avril Reese is viewed around the league?
Well, he was good against Michigan. So what will happen is they'll not only ask him about it, they'll go back to Matt Patricia, who has relations in the NFL, spent a lot of time with the Patriots, and was the head coach of the Detroit Lions. That didn't work out too well. But they'll talk to the coaching staff. Was the scheme different? What happened here? Just like Carson Beck playing a terrific game against Ohio State won't vault him to the top of the draft boards. Two poor games or two games where he wasn't the same playmaker that he was for most of the season isn't going to drop Avril Reese out of the top 10.
The other games, you have a couple more. Obviously, a lot of talk around Mendoza and how he and Indiana shined and you know BTA to Alabama. How does that impact Mendoza for you?
It really doesn't. I mean, there was a team win by Indiana when they crushed Alabama. The defense played great. They ran the ball incredibly well, as they did against Ohio State. And Mendoza played within the system. See, that's what that's going to have to decide with Mendoza. That's why I say everyone's penciling him as the first pick of the draft. We don't know. Mendoza is a terrific quarterback. He's got outstanding physical skills. He's a great leader. You see it in the interviews, which help him. But the fact is, he's never really had to carry this Indiana offense on his shoulders at really no point in the career. You go back to that Illinois game early in the year when everybody was looking at that game. I believe it was the first Big Ten game of the year for both teams, where Indiana won by 40 plus points. It was a lot of short receiver throws. It was a lot of throws behind the line of scrimmage where receivers were picking up yards after the catch. Even the Big Ten title game, it was the running of Hemby that set up the passing of Mendoza. So I think it's good that Mendoza is able to play within the system, but he's never been able to, never been asked to really carry the team or carry the load, say the way Cam Ward did a year ago, the way even Jaden Daniels did at LSU. So that's something scouts are going to have to kind of sift through it and decide.
So, if you were forced to put the label on him right now, game manager versus game changer,
Uh,
where does Mendoza sit for you?
He probably sits somewhere in the middle. I think I would, to be honest about it, I think he's a game manager that can become a game changer. He's a game manager like Mac Jones was when Mac Jones entered the draft, but he's got much better, greater physical skills than Mac Jones. So he has the ability, based on those physical skills, to become, a game changer.
As a point of
And
reference,
that's the way, that's really that's a good thing because,
sure,
you know,
that's development.
guy comes in as a game changer is often prone to mistakes, a lot of interceptions, which Mendoza may suffer through as a rookie. But when you're a game manager and you play within the system and you see the field and you're disciplined, but you have those physical skills to take your game to the next level, that's where you want to be.
I'm just curious as a point of reference when we talk about game changer versus game manager. You have Cam Newton out there right now. Uh, I don't know if it's just you know uh, revenge venom against the Patriots or what his real take is, but he's putting it out there right now that Drake May is a game manager. Where do you sit on May as a game manager versus game changer?
Again, I think he's both. I mean, I think he's got the physical skills to be a game changer. And watching a lot of AFC East football, I've seen it. Versus, being a game manager. Now, I hate to bring this up. Let's see what happens with Stephon Diggs if he's available, in the playoffs, because Stephon Diggs is that game-changing receiver at the disposal of Drake May. So that will be an interesting part of the equation that will, ultimately answer your question.
Yeah, I don't. The arraignment's not even till the January 23rd on that, so I don't think the NFL will make a ruling on it right away. I hope not. Anyway, as a Patriots fan. All right, so Trinidad Chambliss, a
Yeah.
guy that a lot of folks look as more of the game changer versus the
Yeah.
game manager label right now. What did you see versus Georgia?
Well, I think he's both. I think he's got, he's got the arm to make the big plays. to get the ball downfield as he did like he did against Georgia, but he also does a good job managing the game. He doesn't throw bad interceptions. There were a lot of drops. If you watched that game against Georgia early on, there was a lot of drop. There were a few. I shouldn't say a lot. There were a few drops by the Mississippi receivers. There was some bad decisions. You remember at the end of the first half, DeQuan Wright, the tight end who had earlier dropped the pass, catches the ball, keeps the play in bounds. The clock runs down. They don't have a chance to kick the field goal. But the fact is, Chambliss kept his team in the game. He basically carried that offense on his shoulders. Had two outstanding performances by his receivers. But the whole Trinidad Chambliss story is fantastic. The guy comes off the bench, third game of the year, middle of September.
Division II. I mean,
transfer. He's a shorter guy, and I remember somebody telling me at the time before he played, he goes, this guy's a day 2 prospect. And my response was, you're crazy. Yeah. And sure enough, he's proven himself to be a day 2 prospect. Now, Trinidad Chambliss is trying to get an NCAA waiver. He's already said if he gets that waiver, he's going back to play for Mississippi in 2026. If he doesn't, he's going to enter the draft. Probably going to be a day 2 pick. The big issue with Trinidad Chambliss is he's going to be under 6 foot tall. And whether it's Tua Tagovailoa, whether it's Bryce Young, these shorter quarterbacks, have
Wilson.
not really worked out. Baker Mayfield has taken a while to develop his game. So that's something that NFL scouts and NFL teams are going to have to take into consideration.
Whether he goes back, let's just say for sake of purposes of this discussion, he comes in. Light quarterback class. You're saying day 2 right now. With just the way that this works every single year, it seems like quarterbacks that maybe we're even talking about day 3 in December and January, all of a sudden the buzz starts building and they creep into day 1. Do you see a scenario where Chambliss becomes a day 1 guy?
Potentially. I mean, listen, what did the Giants do last year? They traded back into the bottom half of round 1 to take Jackson Dart. The Cleveland Browns have a history of that, trading into the bottom part of round 1 to get that quarterback. Is it a possibility? It's absolutely a possibility. Obviously he's got to finish off the college football playoffs, and then he's got to wait and see what the waiver decision is from the NC2A. Hopefully that comes soon, because depending on how Mississippi does in the college football playoffs, you got events like the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. And as I said time and time again, the Senior Bowl is a kingmaker at the quarterback position. You look at the Mac Jones, the Phillip Rivers, the Donovan McNabbs, the David Carrs, and I know there's a host, Carson Palmers. There's a host of guys that I'm forgetting, and I've been every Senior Bowl practice since 2000. And a quarterback goes there, he lights it up, and all of a sudden his draft stock really takes off more than anything that the college football playoffs would give him an opportunity to do. So a decision has got to be made by the NCAA. Then he's got to decide if he, depending on how deep into the playoffs Mississippi goes, does he go to a place like the Senior Bowl? Then he's got the combine. So there's plenty of time for that to happen. But the fact is Trinidad Chambliss, he walks the walk and he talks the talk and he walks the walk. I mean, he has done a great job coming off the bench to start for the Rebels.
All right, let's kind of get inside the scout's mind a little bit here. You got a guy on the Hurricanes that you're really kind of zoned in on.
Right. Well, Ruben Bain, I mean, he's going to be one of the more interesting conversation, players that is talked about leading up to the draft. The pass rusher from Miami. He's an explosive guy. He's omnipresent on every down. You saw him against what he did against the Ohio State Buckeyes. But even though he gets a lot of pressure, even though he's constantly behind the line of scrimmage, he doesn't have great stats. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of sacks. He doesn't have a lot of tackles for loss. He makes opposing quarterbacks uncomfortable. They have to move around the pocket. They have to move their feet, which alters the way a lot of plays happen. And the thing is there's talk that he may have very short arms. So I think with Ruben Bain, you're seeing an explosive athlete who's a terrific football player. Excuse me, I'm dealing with a cold here. Who was been an outstanding pass rusher, who's also a developing prospect. His game in 2025 was much better than it was in 2024. The issue is, our scouts. What do scouts think about the lack of production? Does he meet those metrics as far as arm length and things like that some teams are concerned with? We won't know about that to the combine. So I think Ruben Bain is a guy that you'll see him in these mock drafts go as early as 5, and he could go as late as 15. We'll see what teams think about him once he officially declares for the draft, which he's going to do, and there's more chatter around him.
Speaking of the chatter, it's always fascinating to me how things change. Like you said, kingmakers at the Senior Bowl, then they get in front of guys at the combine. How things change. You got a story about a prospect in terms of how things can change at the combine.
Well, to set the scene for you with this story is, I was probably the first guy to report from inside the combine. In 2000, what that was in 2000, I was the first guy, as I said, to go to Senior Bowl practices, the first draft analyst, if you would, to report live from Senior Bowl practice. And what happened was the following year, all these guys that were internet draft analysts basically descended on the Senior Bowl. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I gotta find a way to elevate the bar here. So I went to the NFL Combine in February of 2000. Had to be February 2001. Got on a plane. Had no idea what the order was or schedule was for the combine. Flew. Had no idea where I was going to stay. I got there, and the combine at the time was held at the RCA Dome. I had the advantage of knowing somebody who worked inside the RCA Dome in where the United States Track and Field offices used to be. And I went and I saw it was my old college track and field coach, and he said, "Okay, this is, if you want to get into the combine, this is how you do it." So starting in 2001, for lack of a better term, I started sneaking into the combine and getting information from the combine. And there was no media center at the combine at the time. There was no. It was basically guys like John Clayton and Chris Mortensen who used to stand outside the workout exit and entry place with their notebooks and their handheld tape recorders,
And
waiting
their
for
ear literally to the ground.
waiting for their head coaches and general managers to come out to give them quotes and let them know what happened. They'd all meet at Shula's Steakhouse that night, and the more people drank, the more information would get out. But I got into the combine. I found a way to get in. So 2004, I was getting a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more bold, and I'd go to places, and I started going into the weigh-ins. And the 2004 combine, I am in the weigh-ins for the quarterbacks, and I'm sitting next to none other than Doug Williams. Doug Williams, the Super Bowl winning quarterback, who was the Super Bowl MVP with the then Washington Redskins, was the head coach of Grambling University, was also a scout with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which I believe that was his title when we were sitting next to each other, and we're chatting, and the quarterbacks are coming up and they're being weighed, and they announce the height and weight, and everybody write it down. Well, up to the scale comes a guy by the name of Jared Lorenzen, who was affectionately known as the Hefty Lefty from the University of Kentucky. The guy was massive. He had a huge arm, and he was a vertical quarterback. You talk about a game changer versus a game manager. Jared Lorenzen was a game changer. Wasn't so much a game manager, but he was a game changer. So, this is 2001. You're looking at your quarterbacks being 6'2.5", 220 pounds. Jared Lorenzen steps on the scale, and when they measure him, the guys who are doing the measurements, he yells out 6040 for 6'4". Then he steps on the scale, and the guy reading the weight yells out 280 pounds. And people were laughing. Some guys going, "My man, my man." And I'll never forget this. Doug Williams looks at me and he's laughing. He goes, "Damn, he should have been with the offensive lineman." And we sat there and we laughed and laughed. Now, the second part of that story is they were doing the ball speed drills, and the ball speed drills is where they get the radar gun out, and the guy and the quarterbacks throw the ball into the blocking dummy, and they measure his ball speed. And what used to happen was a ball boy from the Baltimore or the Indianapolis Colts who got the day off from school would sit there with the movable dummy, and a scout would stand behind him with the radar gun, and the quarterback would fire the ball into the dummy, and they would chart the speed on the radar gun. So Jared Lorenzen comes up, and again, this is in the RCA Dome, and I'm watching this, and Jared Lorenzen whips the ball into the ball boy. Ball boy, the ball hits the dummy. The ball boy goes back. He goes flying back into the scout. The radar gun goes flying, and everything's broken. They have to do it again. And I'm watching this, and the Indianapolis Colt ball boys kind of hide behind the blocking dummy, and the scout with the radar like this because they haven't gotten a speed on Jared Lorenzen's passes. Jared Lorenzen was not drafted that year. He was eventually signed by the New York Giants as an undrafted free agent. Actually won a Super Bowl ring with the NFL Giants. Had a lot of weight problems, sadly. He talked about it publicly later on in his life, where he was over 500 pounds at some point, and he had big time troubles trying to control his weight.
Yeah.
Uh, he ended up dying at very early age. I think he was 38 years old. He died from kidney and heart problems. Rest in peace. He was a fun-loving guy,
Phenomenal guy.
but that 2004 combine, I will never forget it.
I mean, I tell people, not apples to apples, but in terms of just like the hype and, like you said, the game changer element, he was like Cam Scattaboo before there was a Cam Scattaboo. He was like the original Cam Scattaboo in New York.
And people loved him because
Oh
he
yeah.
was he could throw the ball a country mile, and he was like a country bumpkin.
Oh yeah. Great story. Great story. All right, let's delve into the mailbag a little bit. Now, as we get going with this, we want to hear from you guys. We're going to have a special newsletter that comes out with Essentially Sports. You can get us on our social media. What's your Twitter, Tony?
At Tony Pauline.
At Tony Pauline. Hit Tony up there. Hit us up on Reddit. Anywhere you can find us. We want to hear from you in terms of questions, in terms of things we can get answered for you on the show. One of the first things that we got out of our newsletter subscribers this week, Jason from Louisiana. Going back to Dante Moore, do you feel right now Dante Moore is going to declare for the draft?
When I wrote the article about a month ago at Essentially Sports, I was like, I thought maybe 30% yes, 70% no. Then it was 50-50 when I updated the article. From what I said at the beginning of this podcast, that the people are going to recommend, he enter the draft and then he makes the decision by himself. I'm going to say it's about 70. I'm thinking right now it's about 70% yes, he enters the draft.
All right, Jason, appreciate the question. Allison from Maine. Got my Wicked Smart shirt on. I'm a Mainer myself. So Allison's question: who is the most underrated quarterback from this year's draft class that maybe no one's talking about right now?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Taylon Green of Arkansas. Arkansas has had a lot of problems with that program. They've never been consistent. Fired the head coach. Taylon Green, when you look at the physical skills, the size, the athleticism, the arm strength, the ability to be an RPO type quarterback, he ranks with any quarterback in this draft. Probably could be at the top when you look at the size and the arm strength and everything else. I mean, he is that guy that was forced to carry the Arkansas offense on his shoulders, but he needs a lot of work on his game. He needs a lot of proper coaching. I have him right now as a fourth round pick. Taylon Green is going to be at the Senior Bowl. So he's going to have the ability to wow people, and I'm sure he will in certain spots throughout the 3 days of Senior Bowl practice. But if Talon Green, puts together 3 great days of Senior Bowl practices and then has good interviews in Mobile, because the interview process at the Senior Bowl has taken on another dimension of importance, I think he's a guy that people are really going to be talking about as we head towards April's draft.
Tony, how much has it changed in terms of the shine around quarterbacks, what it means to be a number one pick quarterback? How much have the Brock Purdy's, we really want to go back to Tom Brady, the guys that are making impacts, the Dak Prescotts making impacts as later round picks. How much has it changed in terms of the feel about can a late round quarterback be my franchise guy?
I think the shine is actually on the quarterback coaches, the offensive coordinators, the head offensive minded head coaches that can develop these guys. Because, Tom Brady, if the New York Jets draft him in the 6th round, it doesn't have the same career, in my opinion, doesn't have the same career as going to Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, who, while everyone talks about Tom Brady, they also drafted Matt Castle in the 7th round and traded him for a 1st round pick. We saw them draft multiple quarterbacks and trade them off to get more in return. So it's more about the who's developing the quarterback, who's coaching the quarterback, having the people around the quarterback, and the culture, for that quarterback. Go back, people talk about, well, the New York Jets' biggest mistake was 1983. They took Ken O'Brien over Dan Marino. And I'm believe to this day that if Dan Marino was selected by the New York Jets in the 1983 draft under Joe Walton, he doesn't have the same career that he does in Miami, who was ready to take Ken O'Brien in that draft. If you saw that 30 for 30 episode, and if Ken O'Brien ended up landing in Miami and was coached by Don Shula, he has a significantly better career. So I think it's more about who's coaching the quarterback. No coincidence that Kyle Shanahan, the Philadelphia Eagles, Andy Reid, and we can go, on and on about these organizations and these coaches are able to mine gold with quarterbacks regardless of where they select them in the draft.
Aikman talked a lot about that this week in terms of his career and where it would have been if he hadn't gotten Norv Turner in there. It matters. It's game changers for these guys. All right, so appreciate the question there. Alex from Las Vegas. Tony, do you think that the Cowboys, that the Raiders follow the Cowboys blueprint and move Max Crosby for 1st round picks?
I think it's possible. I mean, you got basically a 2nd-year general manager. You're going to have a 1st-year head coach. Max Crosby is not their player per se. They didn't select him. Comes from a former regime. So if they feel that they can move Max Crosby and get draft capital in return, I think it's obviously something that they're going to broach. They're going to look at. Now, let's be honest. This is not a strong 1st round in the NFL draft. This is not a good year to be selecting at the top. This is not like the past couple of years. So you have to take that into consideration. But again, with the 2nd-year general manager who's going to have a larger say, a new head coach that will eventually be named, plus Tom Brady there, I could absolutely see them trading off pieces for draft capital. They need offensive linemen. They are desperate at the receiver position. They need help on defense. And you're going to draft a quarterback at the top. So it's going to be a longer process. It's not like you're looking to win in 2026 or 2027, although that can happen these days. So it would make sense if they get a lot in return for a guy like Max Crosby, who is a good player on the field, is a good player to have in the clubhouse. But I'm sure he also is at a point in his career where he wants to win.
Was he one of those veterans that was top of mind that you were saying earlier in terms of the worm kind of turning there in Vegas?
I don't want to mention names. People have to draw their own conclusions on the top players that are getting fed up and that their careers are being wasted.
Fair enough. All right, Debbie from Cleveland. We obviously talked about Stefanski getting the hook in Cleveland. Where do you see Shador Sanders next season? Does Stefanski being gone help him or hurt or not matter?
Well, you got to remember, they kept Andrew Berry, the general manager. And Andrew Berry, for the rest of his life, is going to be known as the general manager who gave Deshaun Watson that massive contract that basically changed the face of the way quarterbacks are paid in the NFL. So, the fact is, and Deshaun Watson is still on the roster. And I'm going to be interested to see if the new coach who comes in is open to say, okay, Watson's expected to come back in 2026. Let's give him a chance because, I mean, all the draft capital they gave away to get Deshaun Watson, all the money that they paid Deshaun Watson, it's been a disaster, but he's still on the books and on the roster. Um, do I
But
think that
the one guy that took a shot on Sanders.
well, I mean, yes and no. Sanders was eventually going to go at some point in time. The risk, the reward outweighed the risk of taking Shador Sanders. I don't think it was a great pick. I think what happened. I know what happened was, Shador Sanders was talked about ad nauseum in the media in the lead up to the 2025 draft when he really didn't deserve all the headlines he was getting because he wasn't that he wasn't that good. He didn't have the season in 2024 that was expected of him. That's a different conversation. To answer the question from the lady who sent it, I think Shador Sanders is going to get an opportunity to play. There's no reason why he shouldn't. To be the number one quarterback. I mean, has he shown enough this year to make you believe that he's the number one quarterback of a franchise moving forward? No, not my opinion. But give him a chance to see what happens. It's interesting because I think that Shador Sanders would have been a better third round pick, and Dylan Gabriel would have been better as a fifth round pick because Dylan Gabriel's proven that he's nothing other than what we all thought he was going to be. A good backup number 3 quarterback on a roster.
Did Sanders outperform your grade, your thought in terms of what he'd be?
Not really. I mean, I don't think he is the game changer. He's not the game manager. He's still running in reverse when he's being pressured, which is a disaster. Zach Wilson made a career out of that. He's still making some really bad throws. I think with Shador Sanders, the expectations on him were just out of control, and a lot of the comments that he made and a lot of things he said, some of the ways just made the situation worse. So no, he did not outplay my expectations. I mean, I think it was a good move by Cleveland to put him in at the end of the season. I struggle to see that he's going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL anytime soon. Maybe it'll happen 2 or 3 years down the road.
Gosh, it's so thin right now, though, Tony, around the league in terms of talent and depth charts on quarterback. I gotta imagine the name alone, uh,
But that's
and
the
and
problem, though.
and
See, you just
yeah,
you just exemplified the problem. It's
yeah.
like Arch Manning. Okay, when the 2025 draft was over, people were projecting Arch Manning as the number one pick of the 2026 draft. Arch Manning never did anything to deserve that consideration. It was because of his name. If his name was Arch Thompson as the quarterback at Texas, no one would be paying attention to him. But because his name was Arch Manning, people thought he was going to be the first pick of the draft. Because his name is Shador Sanders and he was coached by his father, people look at the name. That was the problem. That was the overhype of Shador Sanders. That was the overhype of Arch Manning and coming into the season.
I mean, it's the court of public opinion now, right? It's social media. These GMs are on the hook for all that. How? It's got to be frustrating for you as a talent evaluator to see how much the court of public opinion, the social media buzz has invaded the war room.
But has it? I don't think it has. I mean, just because people are out there, I think I, I, I think it has in certain organizations. I reported about what went on with the New York Jets with Woody's son basically seeing what he read on Twitter, what the Jets should be doing, that they weren't, what they were doing, that they shouldn't. And basically, those questions were asked, and it's led up to disaster. So while people want to think that the court of public opinion and social media affects what a team does, well, it does for bad franchises, and that's why they are bad franchises.
It's
But
basically
no,
just another way for a bad franchise to continue being bad.
exactly. But no
Things that
team
have
is in
always happened.
no team is in there on draft weekend saying, okay, well, we're going to take player XYZ. And they say, well, listen, this is what they're saying about him on Twitter. This is what they're saying about him on Reddit. We better, no one, nobody's doing that. I mean, they have scouting departments that they expend $5 million on. They don't care what some, bozo or even Tony Pauline, the bozo, says on the internet about a player.
Do you see anybody that's going to get that media buzz that's going to have a similar slide to Sanders this year?
Not really.
Right now, as of January 5th?
No, I mean, Mendoza and Moore are not going to slide. Ty Simpson will have to see the decision that he makes. I think it'd be foolish if Ty Simpson of Alabama enters the draft. I mean, Ty Simpson's a guy who, if he enters the draft, could go a lot later than people are presently predicting. But the Shador Sanders uh, buzz and hype was just over the top. I mean, I'm in the gym every morning. I don't watch ESPN, but the gym I go to had ESPN on, and literally every morning, and literally every morning while I'm in the gym, from January to April, Shador Sanders was one of the top three stories they were constantly talking about, and it was there was no reason
Hourly.
for it other than the name, other than the fact that he had the last name Sanders and who his father was.
It gets tiring. It gets tiring. You almost hope there's not that guy this year that just becomes. I don't see it right now, but I mean, uh, Mendoza continues to outperform, and continue. Indiana wins the CFP. Um, he's not going to have the same. Nobody's going to have the same buzz as somebody with the last name Sanders, but um, it's good to hear. It's good to hear you saying that you don't feel like there's anybody that's going to be that media darling this year
Well,
that we're talking about ad nauseum.
listen to what you just said. You talk about Fernando Mendoza, Heisman Trophy winner, going through the college football playoffs. Indiana in there for a second season, though the quarterback was different a year ago. Potentially winning the national championship. Comparing him to Shador Sanders, who had what, one winning season in FBS football with Colorado. They never battled for a conference title in the
Yep,
Big 12. Granted, he tried to do too much. I think put too much on his shoulders. But I mean, that in my opinion, that just shows the absurdity of the hype that Sanders received.
without a doubt. All right, so as we wrap up this first episode, couple of interesting questions to throw at you as we take a look at drafts of past years.
Right.
Um, what are the top three worst draft picks of we just talked about Sanders. What are the top three worst draft picks in your opinion over the last decade?
You go back to the 2021 draft. You had Trevor Lawrence selected with the first pick of the draft. Zach Wilson was the second pick of the draft. Justin Fields, I believe, was the ninth pick of the draft. Mac Jones was mid first round pick. 15 comes to mind. Trey Lance was the third pick of the draft by the San Francisco 49ers, who traded away a lot of draft capital to move up and get the quarterback from North Dakota State, who played one game the prior year because that was the COVID year, and he didn't play that well. And the Niners traded all his draft capital to move up to get Trey Lance. Trey Lance, since being selected in 2021, has started 6 games in 4 seasons. He didn't play in 2023 because of an injury. The third pick of the draft has started 6 games. Now, Zach Wilson has been a bust, but Zach Wilson was a starter who had win some games. Justin Fields was a bust, but again, he's a starting quarterback, and the Jets overpaid for him last year. Mac Jones has had marginal success, but Trey Lance, started 6 games in his career since entering the league in 2021 as the third pick of the event. It can't get much worse than that. The next guy would be Kevin White, who was the 7th pick of the 2015 draft by the Chicago Bears, a receiver out of West Virginia. He played 30 games, the 7th pick of the draft, played 30 games in his NFL career, started 3, caught 28 passes the 6 years he was in the league. Now, he had a lot of injuries and was sidelined, but again, the 7th pick of the draft, who started 3 games and caught just 28 passes. And, except unless you're a Chicago Bears fan, the name Kevin White doesn't mean anything to you, except Chicago Bears fans will just shake their head in disgust about what an utter, what a terrible pick he was. And then my third massive bust of the past decade, it's got to be Josh Rosen.
Oh, wow.
Quarterback out of UCLA, who was the 10th pick of the Arizona Cardinals in 2018. Came in with a lot of hype. You mentioned Shedeur Sanders hype. It wasn't as great as Josh Rosen, but a lot of people thought he was a great player on the field. Off the field, he was a very polarizing figure. Made some comments, wasn't seen as the leader in the locker room that he should have been. Was okay his first year at Arizona. 10th pick of the draft. Played 3 years in the NFL. Played for 3 different years. After his first year at Arizona, they said, we're done with him. They traded him to Miami. Played a season with Miami. Then he briefly played with Atlanta. Finished his NFL career, 3-year NFL career with 12 TDs and 21 interceptions. So those would be my top 3 picks as far as the biggest bust the past 10 years. I will tell you, honorable mention goes to Anthony Richardson of the Colts.
Oof.
Nothing but a disaster to date.
Josh Rosen, that's funny you bring him up, because when Phillip Rivers came back into the equation and we started recycling these quarterbacks, I started seeing Josh Rosen's name kind of come up as all right, can we bring him back and make something of him down the stretch here? It's wow. That's a good pull there. What about the picks that scouts, and obviously you don't want to admit this, but what are the top 3 picks that scouts got entirely wrong?
Well, I'm going to give you 2 guys an honorable mention. Obviously, if you're going to mention Brock Purdy being one of the biggest busts of all, I'm sorry, if you're going to mention Trey Lance being one of the biggest busts of all time, I just gave it away. Then you got to mention Brock Purdy as being one of the great finds of all time, right? Because a year after they make Trey Lance the 3rd pick of the draft, the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan take Brock Purdy with the final pick of the draft that year, Mr. Irrelevant. He's been a terrific starting quarterback. He wasn't even a Senior Bowl player. He played at the Shrine Bowl. He's been to the Super Bowl. He's going to lead the San Francisco 49ers into the draft this year as the number 2 seed. So I guess it's easy to forget what a massive bust Trey Lance was because Brock Purdy has been so outstanding.
I was just going to say that the 49ers would get a lot more hatred on that front if it wasn't for Purdy.
Of course, without a doubt. I think Cameron Great, the tight end from Harvard, wasn't even drafted. Had a terrific 10-year career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a tight end. Was a consistent threat, a real good 2-way blocker and pass catcher, a guy who came from Harvard, an Ivy League school, doesn't get drafted, goes on to have a productive career for a decade. And my third guy, honorable mention. Granted, we have to wait and see what happens. There's a lot more to be played out. Quinn Ewers of Miami, because people talk about the slide that Shador Sanders made last year deep into the draft. And I said all along, I thought that Quinn Ewers was one of the biggest values of last year's draft. Goes in the 7th round. You know, they basically sidelined Tua. They didn't even play Zach Wilson. They put Quinn Ewers on the field, the former quarterback from Texas, and he's looked reasonably well. So, people talk about, well, will Shador Sanders get a chance to be the number one quarterback in Cleveland? People should talk about whether Quinn Ewers should have an opportunity to be the number one quarterback in Miami next season.
Interesting that you bring up, a guy like yours. I mean, Malik Willis is getting a lot of that sort of shine right now.
It's been brief for Malik Willis. I mean, there's been uh, a lot of bad play by Malik Willis, who was what, a 3rd round pick, and he never panned out. I don't know that teams are looking at him as their future starter, considering the poor play in the past. But you know what? Good for Malik Willis. Was given another opportunity, and it could work out. I mean, look at Sam Darnold, right? I mean, was a complete bust with the Jets. Goes to
Geno
Carolina.
Smith, I mean,
Goes to Carolina, doesn't do anything. He leads leads Minnesota to the playoffs last year. Now he's the top quarterback for the number one seeded Seattle Seahawks. So it's possible.
All right, Tony, great first episode here. Want to remind everybody, the ES big board is up and running now, just getting off the ground. So much more information still to come, but we're excited to get it launched at EssentiallySports.com with Mr. Tony Pauline leading the way. Get on there. Let us know what you think of the draft board. So much more to come down the line in terms of information. This is giddy time of year for you, right? In terms of the senior bowl, the bowls come out. Your bowl season, so to speak.
I don't know if it's giddy, but it's a very busy time of year, and it's only going to get crazier. I mean, like you mentioned, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, be a ton of content on Essentially Sports, not just what goes on at those games, but the talk off the field. And then we'll move into the combine, and then March is pro day month. So make sure you bookmark us, because it's going to be your go-to place for breaking information as far as the NFL draft is concerned. And like you said, that big board will, once it's finalized, will have scouting reports on 400 plus players. So it'll be all the information there that you need.
Subscribe to the podcasts down below. Please, you'll get it wherever you find your favorite podcast: Spotify, iHeart, Apple. Subscribe there, and we'll be back at it next week. Tim Wood here, Tony Pauline, ES DraftCast. We will talk to you next week.